Chapter 103, Monster Slave, a white samurai short. Who can understand a warrior's pain upon a quest of enlightenment by sword of or glory, a life spent causing and taking pain, those who walk the many paths of life, any as diverse as any other. In these modern times, who can understand a warrior's pain upon the peak of conquest, who can understand the conqueror's trial at the peak of giving, who can understand the martyr's sacrifice, with pride and glory at their back, who might understand a knight's duty, with honor as well as all they know, who can know the path of a samurai. Those who are defeated are never forgotten, who can understand the vanquished's loss, a sense of superiority within their charge, who can understand the shock of the cavalry, since the time of man first walked upon this earth. There have been many paths for those who walk the path, a test of courage, loyalty, devotion, and strength that tested men for millennia. Yet now, as we have stepped into the modern age, who can now truly understand the warrior's pain? White samurai upon a journey into historical enlightenment. Black sniffle, so beautiful. Blue. Black, teach me diligence. I wish to follow the warrior's path. Black, the impossible shall remain. Impossible. Blue. Blue. Zzz. Black, speechless. Scene. Chapter 103, Monster Slave. The reactions of those who feel fear are difficult. Those who were frightened have yet to calm themselves since the audiences had begun. Both the Gozus and Mesus were threatened into silence with the Demon Lord's haki, though this seemed to have a rather intense effect on the weaker races outside. Those were the ones that had felt a sense of fear in response to my rather cute outer appearance. Were those guys really scared of such a little amount of power? Well, a majority of them managed to calm themselves as we discussed the inter-exchange of technology and established territorial cooperation. Thus, we will be able to establish suitable contact without them growing more frightened. But here is where our troubles began. The last audience was with the elves who had a complaint to file to me. The ones who came to the discussion were a number of their elders, though specifically there was a disappointing lack in the female elf variety. To begin with, the elf race is generally well known for their unusual longevity. As they are said to be the descendants of forest fairies, they have an average lifespan of between 500 and 800 years. There are even those who are suggested to have lived even far longer, coming closer to a fairy-like existence. Their bodies mature into adulthood at the age of 20. Similar to the human race, yet stop aging beyond that point. For humans who age constantly until their death, they are a race to envy. That is the reason why, even if they were called the Elven Elders, they still have extremely youthful appearances. They start aging rapidly when they begin to draw towards their deaths, and after roughly 20 or 30 years after the aging process begins, they face the risk of senility. Just as elderly humans, due to their age, they have a tendency to not readily seek to give birth, nor do they have the most fertile bodies. Due to such reasons, their numbers remain quite small. I had already known this beforehand, though I was also informed, validating my past knowledge, that because they live so long, their specific village limits the number of offspring that are allowed. This seems to be a rather important aspect of their society. At any rate, the elves are the descendants of a hybrid mutation of a pixie and fairy. As it stands, they are rather similar to the dwarf race, as both have fairy blood in them, though the two races naturally do not get along with one another for various reasons. The interactions between the fairies of the long-forgotten past and the other races had led to the cultivation of their ancestors. I simply cannot judge what happened back then. I don't even know if it is possible for a fairy to sire a child of their own. On top of that, the only fairy I really know currently is Ramirez. Honestly, it isn't a good first impression to a race, but I'll keep my mind open to improvements. From what I did gather from Ramirez, out of curiosity, she couldn't remember much about her kin, no matter how much she tried to look back. It would seem that she had undergone a repeated reincarnation. I recalled such things as I continued to listen to the elder suit. The elders had begun with a bow in formality. Elven Elder One, it is a fine honor to be able to meet you. Surely today is one fit for celebration, and forgive me, but might you listen to our rather selfish suit? After this, we ended up entering the discussion over the main topic. In brief, the elder went on to explain that a number of their villagers had been kidnapped. They were requesting our cooperation to rescue them, as it were, as they were extremely desperate in their attempts to appeal to me. I was rather convinced that they weren't lying about the situation. Honestly, though, choosing a word other than suit might have been a better idea for this specific situation. We listened to their plight in detail. From the start, the elves were under the protection of a rather powerful illusion-type barrier that would distort one's very sense of direction, thus preventing most intruders from approaching their settlement. Since they had lived long lives, their most masterful members had created this barrier to protect them against outside threats. Since their appearances are always extremely attractive, they are also the targets of greedy human slavers. However, their troubles began to occur around 300 years ago, when the master who had created the barrier had wedded into a foreign nation and left the village. It would seem that a rather heretical and youthful individual of their community wanted to prove their still budding abilities and wished to close the gap between himself and the former master. In the end, he had disrupted the barrier and made living under the barrier's protection rather difficult. This occurred roughly 100 years ago, just as the war between the Mezo and Gozo had just begun to heat up. In other words, they just had rather bad luck in the matter. Thus, due to the distortion effects causing problems, living within the hidden village had become rather difficult. They were forced to begin looking into moving their village, though due to the vastness of the Great Jura Forest, finding a new location to establish their village was proving rather difficult. In the meantime, the number of magic beast attacks had become far more frequent recently, and by this time the maintenance of the barrier had all but ceased. It seems that they had decided to move their settlement closer to the human settlements for security. In the end, this turned out to be the cause of a worst-case scenario, as they found themselves attacked by slavers. Monster slaves are prohibited in most human kingdoms, so while elves may be one of the species of demi-human considered closest to humankind, they are still treated as if they were monsters, different from humans, less than humans. In the case of neighboring kingdoms, rather than enforcing such laws, there's often bribery involved in many levels of government. They had attempted a desperate resistance. However, the hunters had extensive experience in such matters. Thus, in the end, the result led to many of their youths being captured. That's what happened in a nutshell. Rimuru, is this something that has happened within a day or so? Perhaps there is something that can be done if those responsible are still close by, or even still in the forest. If several days have already passed, then it might very well be a hopeless endeavor. What I wanted to achieve by asking this was to confirm the most important detail. Then, Elven Elder 2. Right after the large-scale surprise attack on our people, we had received word of a demon lord's enthronement. Not only that, but one who was recognized by the great demon lords at their banquet. Since then, we have decided that it must have been the will of the heavens for us to hold out for as long as we have, to beg for the protection and aid from the demon lord who would come. We understand how difficult this would be, but we can only hope to ignore our pride and shamelessly ask for your help. Rimuru. I see. So basically, right after the surprise attack that had devastated their people, the news of a recognized demon lord's enthronement had come to them. They had fallen so deep into despair with almost all of their options and hopes exhausted. Thus, in the end, discovering a demon lord in rulership of their forest had become their last hope. However, this wouldn't be some divine test to challenge my love for elves, would it? In other words, a fight is being picked with me. After all this trouble, we can finally have elves opening shops within my country. A sudden, somewhat dark thought that enveloped my mind in secret, and thus I plotted. Unforgivable. These humans who dared to enslave the elves must never be allowed forgiveness. I won't allow such behavior, though I do wonder just how many of them would seriously work for my cause after this is all said and done. It wouldn't be worth all the effort if I didn't receive anything. Rimuru. All right, as for your request, I will grant you my aid. I pray for the arrival of our collaboration's destined success in the near future. Let us commence the rescue mission at once. I had given them my promise and allowed them to take a rest. They have been on the run on total desperation to reach here for quite some time now. Their village was no longer suitable for habitation and abandoned, and the new village they had attempted to build was lost. Since this was the case, the survivors from the attack had all come here. In the end, they had bid their lives from before farewell, as they had feared the rest of them would also fall victim to slavers and caught. The number of individuals I could bring with me in a hunting party would be rather limited, and it would seem that the hunters withdrew the moment they completed their first raid. I called Zoe to begin an investigation on the elven village that had been attacked. If any information were to be found, it would be there. Currently, Zoe and the others are currently launching their investigation. Rimura, if by any chance you were to come about some of the hunters, or if they return, capture them alive, will make them share the information about their inner workings. I want to collapse their little ring for good, if I can get the chance. Zoe, by your will. Zoe swiftly departed to enact my orders. This will do just fine. Afterwards, I contacted Murmiles to ask if he knew anything in regards to monster slaves. With this, the meeting with the elves had more or less ended, leaving me to my own research into various matters. For the sake of my dreams to become the owner of the elven shops, there will be no limit to how far I will go. This is no time to rest. I must find them at all costs. I had set off immediately towards Murmiles. I had hesitated in having him come to me since he was currently busy with my other orders. So I decided it would be best to go and speak with him in person. Well, that was part of it anyways. I wanted to get out of there before they began to decorate me, but put a tangerine over my head and treat me like a figurine. Thus, I was able to escape from that altar. Truthfully, even though the Labyrinth project is very near and dear to my heart, if I have one, the Elven shop is something even more important. The main priority that should be on everyone's minds right now is the immediate liberation of the elf captives. With my mind made up, myself and several others made haste towards Murmiles' workplace. Murmiles, my, if it isn't Rimuru-sama. My apologies, it's rather busy here. Perhaps would you prefer to speak somewhere else? Rimuru, indeed, it's hard work, Murmiles. Son, I had to greet so many people as the head of this town. Well, I suppose it feels like my only job these days anyways. Murmiles, ha 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 ha, is that right? Well, what might bring you to this humble man today, Rimuru-sama? Even though he's become rather busy, he's still willing and able to spare some time for me. Quite an able person, if I were to say so. We moved to a different location and spent some time discussing various things, including the main reason for my being there. I asked him about what he knows regarding monster slavery over some fine imported red tea. After our chat, I managed to gain a rough understanding of the current situation. What I previously didn't know is that there was a single organization behind this entire matter. It was known as Cerberus. I suppose if there were organizations such as the Freedom Association, of course there would be such organizations as this as well. In such groups as the Freedom Association, there are taxes one pays when someone claims their rewards for missions or quests. On the other hand, if you are part of a secret organization, you wouldn't have to pay any taxes on your gains. Naturally, the contents of such work are illegal. However, since this is vital work for the sake of the world's evil, there will be jobs that must never come to light for the continuation of society's function. When it comes to such things, there are many who utilize such methods, especially amongst the nobles who wouldn't wish to dirty their own hands with such messy things. The secret organization, Cerberus, is quite useful for them. Therefore, through a solid understanding between the various people who run society, such secret associations are allowed to exist. The three heads of the Cerberus Association are known as wealth, women, and power. The individuals who govern these three aspects of life are called the Big Three. Muir Miles also mentioned that apart from Cerberus, there wouldn't be another organization that would be capable of conducting large-scale monster slavery. It's unlikely for the black market to spread its wings too far. In short, the jobs performed by Cerberus are always backed by by nobles or major powers. It is certainly not some simple thing you'd be able to find in a back street. Back to back, from simplicity to complexity, Cerberus is an organization that actually has a fine set of rules. Miles, but even though they cannot be compared to the Freedom Association in terms of size, they still have a large amount of influence. They are a large association that controls a large amount of wealth. Thanks to that, it would be difficult to face them with the strength of a single country. Business-wise, we also perform several transactions together, but we follow the rules, from legal work to illegal ones. They would undertake any job of any form so long as it held benefits to them. This was mentioned amongst other things. Slavery-wise, even among Cerberus, human slavery was still outright illegal. Even though the individuals involved this time are monsters, they are also regarded as demi-humans. Thus, they are found in a gray zone between legal and illegal within the underground world. Rimuru, well, I've gotten a general picture now. If one were to have a transaction with elves as the goods, if it weren't such an organization, it probably wouldn't even be possible. If they weren't decently armed, it probably wouldn't have even been possible for them to have captured the elves. Saying this out loud, I grumbled. Miles, when you were talking about monster slaves, you had mentioned elves, right? Now that I really think about it recently, I've heard rumors about a group of elven slaves. When Miles said that, I also recalled something. The elf race had been in decline for centuries. At present, there probably aren't more than 100 of them left. There couldn't possibly any willing elven slaves around. They're probably all related if I can find them. Rimuru, can you please tell me the full details, Miles? Miles-san? Unexpectedly, I seem to have managed to obtain information that would help us resolve this incident from an unexpected source. The information seemed to be about some Viscount. The name rang a bell, though I wasn't certain if it would be that convenient to have met him like that, so I dismissed the feeling. That was until Murmels himself mentioned that the two were in the same. Murmels, it seems that you probably remember him. That's right. It was the same individual who had been talking with me when you had entered my store last time. He was trying to get me to support a business venture with elvish slaves as the managers. I see. So it was that guy. I had forgotten about him completely. However, Wisdom King Raphael had brought up that person as he fit the profile. Then, when Murmels mentioned him, Raphael brought up an image into my head. Now that I see him, he reeks of suspiciousness. Now then, the next thing to do is, Rimuru, this guy, since he's taken people from my territory, can't this be easily used as a casus belli? Usually, if someone were to have the gall to abduct citizens from another country, I'd see it as more or less declaring war on them. Just as a precaution, I decided it would be safe to ask Murmels. I suppose that's how it is. According to a treaty that was signed and agreed upon between a majority of countries, if the residents of a country were to be abducted and or held against their will, it would not be strange for it to lead to a war starting over it. In order to avoid this kind of situation, slavery ended up becoming prohibited. However, to actually state that the elves are citizens of Tempest, wouldn't that be rather difficult? Rimuru, Mirmas, Rimuru, why would that be? Mirmas, no, why? Even if you were to ask me, I suppose it's to say that if they don't live in your own directly, wouldn't they be exempted from the rights of Jura Forest? Isn't this rather different than what is the case? While the whole of Jura Forest had become my territory, there shouldn't be any doubt about all species falling under my jurisdiction, even if the species were to be similar to the Tengu, who had insisted on a non-interference pact. I still should have more than enough say towards what people can do to people who fall under my sphere of influence. I allow them all to live within my territory, and I allow the existence of non-interference with them. Even if I were to not be interfering with them, I will not acknowledge the influence or interference of other nations even to such groups. One does not simply accept the divine prestige of a demon lord. It is a simple fact. Rimuru, Myormal-san, the Great Jura Forest in its entirety was granted as my demesne. Thus, I should fully have the capability to voice my complaints should someone be attempting to mess with the peoples within it. Yes? Miles, huh? Rimuru. No, I've already decided to claim it as my territory as well. So should the invitations that were sent out also just double as a revealment of the country? Murmels, eh? These invitations are for the sake of unveiling the approved monsters country, and this fight tournament will also be used to announce the news that a demon lord reigns over such a nation. Apparently, there seems to be some sort of fundamental misunderstanding between us. By any chance, does he perhaps not know that the whole forest was decided to be my territory? Rimuru, Murmel-san, I'd like to confirm something with you. Are you not aware that my official appointment as a demon lord at the banquet also granted me territory, and that such territory would consist of the whole of the Great Jura Forest? Realizing the sheer size of the territory that I reigned over, Murmels was at a complete loss for words. He had a black expression, as if he was no longer capable of processing the information. Huh? But there aren't any words coming out to think he would be shocked to this extent. I simply thought he already knew about this. I was convinced that he already knew about that. My bad. Come to think about it, I probably haven't even properly explained how I now govern the entire forest. Suddenly, Murmiles managed to process the information. Murmiles, huh? The entire forest? The entire Great Jura Forest? What? Drimurudana, you were admitted such a large domain? His speech has become rather chaotic. How unfortunate. I suppose he might almost feel tricked in some way. Well, there are many terrible things in this world. This will probably be the most benign of them. However, I'd like to wait before working with it all. Working with just a bit of territory is easy, but working with such a large amount can be troublesome. Well, it's mostly because I wanted a very easy life that I recruited him to help. So what's wrong with the current situation? It's the fault of those who accepted without finding out all of the details. Once the management of this tournament is over this time around, it may very well be goodbye. Of course, such a thing will probably not be allowed. Besides, there will be no problem with leaving the whole thing to him in the future as well. Regarding this, we're of equal status regarding this current instance, so let's just laugh it off, forgive and forget, right? Old Murmelson. Murmels, why do you have such a happy air around you? What was that about equal status that you had mentioned earlier? Wait, doesn't this mean that I'm being left cheated one-sidedly? I mean, there's no way I could be satisfied with my current job content. Rimuru, what's with that? There isn't any problem here, is there? Murmels, well, rather, you're certainly not going to end up entrusting it all to me, right? It can't be. The development of the Great Jura Forest, you aren't leaving it all to me, right? Rimuru, ahahaha, why you? Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. What's important right now are the elves. He looked as if he was trying to refute something but gave it up in the end. Rather than that, what's important right now are the elves. As if he snapped out of his shock, Murmels had a serious expression once more. He had a faster mental recovery speed than I thought he would. Well, either that or he might have just decided to simply give up. Things advanced quickly from that point. Since he might be here for a just reason, I will question Viscount Cossack thoroughly. And so I proposed, Rimuru. No, even if I arrest that small fry, there's no point in doing so. They're bound to cut their losses, so it's still too early for the king to move at this point. I had proposed such. I'm certain there's a mutual assistance pact that had been signed and put into law, so the Burman kingdom should be in a position to deal with their errant nobles this time around. Rather than directly confronting them, it might be too early to start forming countermeasures. Rimuru, that might be better. By the way, I have never met the king. What should I do? Murmels nodded profusely. I leave it to you. Well, I'm the one negotiating contracts. Thus, we have decided to initiate this plan immediately. Thus, I brought along Murmels and headed towards the Burman kingdom with spatial transfer gate creation. This is due to the influence of spatial abilities. Distortion cracks started appearing in front of me. We were able to move between multiple locations. It's the upgraded version of spatial transfer. After deciding a destination, I can move there in an instant because I can bring along others. It is convenient, but consumes along a magical energy. Thinking about it in common sense, manipulating space-time would naturally cost quite a fair bit of energy. Though, to me, this is no big deal. Since there is no excessive wasted time when transferring, I was able to move quickly. Murmiles was scared stiff at first. However, we went through the gate unexpectedly smoothly. As expected, it is a large structure. Maybe it's because I'm beginning to understand the way demon lords think. Nothing seems to faze me anymore. At Murmiles' house, I was waiting for the other party to make contact. After sending Murmiles to the royal capital, we had requested an audience with the king. However, it would take some time, so he told me to wait in the halls. But before even 3 hours had passed, a horse carriage arrived smoothly. Murmiles had been successful and came to pick me up. Murmiles. As expected, it went smoothly. I'm glad that I mentioned Rimuru-sama's name when I was requesting an audience. Permission was granted immediately. Since we have discussed the situation, today Viscount Cossack will also be coming along for this meeting. They had handled me far more carefully than I thought they would. After being informed how important the arriving guest is, perhaps they were just acting accordingly. Well, intelligence is the lifeline of the weak. It's how they survive amongst the strong. So maybe they were driven by the thought of what would happen if they mishandled the situation. Well, with Fuse in the area, they performed well. We arrived at the royal capital and entered the wide halls. In there, simple sitting, tea, snacks, and whatnots had been prepared. The plump person sitting on one of the seats stood up and came to greet us, and arriving behind happened to be a friend of Fuse, Baron Barullado. I would assume that this chubby uncle here is probably the king of this country, King Burud. Nice to meet you. I am the king of this country, Burud von Burumdo. It is a pleasure to meet you, King of Monsters. No, member of the 8-star Demon Lords. Hi, Demon Lord Rimuru Dono. He spoke to me with a friendly tone. I was surprised. I mean, did the king just come to greet me before anyone else? No, this is probably because I'm also a recognized king. Rimuru, nice to meet you. I am Rimuru Tempest. I have become a Demon Lord, but can we still continue our agreement? King Burud, of course, we were about to ask you the same thing. We were unaware about this and have seemed to cause you inconvenience. I am grateful for your humbleness. By all means, please punish this one. As for any compensation for damages, Rimuru, no, don't worry yourself over such things. There's no need for any reparations if the troubles are all resolved in the end. I would like us to continue being good acquaintances out of the best interests of our peoples. King Burud. Oh, having you say this is truly helpful. Certainly one worthy of such power and prestige, such as yourself. It was a docile face, but as soon as he smiled, there was an excessive annoying feel to it. While I'm rather uncertain if he would have even paid anything, there is no real doubt that this large uncle is a rather sly character. However, I wonder why he's a strangely lovable uncle. During our conversation, the two that came along were brought forth. One of them was the character in question, Count Cossack himself. Like how I seen him previously, he wore a few good quality clothing. He was surrounded by the royal guards, unable to comprehend what's going on. The other was a gentleman in full black. His attire was a black Chinese-style suit with the gold embroideries depicting 3 tiger heads. When they said Cerberus, I was sure it would turn out to be the 3-headed canine gatekeeper of hell. Though I wonder if there is any difference here. From my point of view, this person is likely an executive of Cerberus with a similar unwavering expression to me, and also the similar dignity of a king. The soldiers only surrounded him, but they didn't dare meddle with him. This is probably because he had an atmosphere that separates him from an ordinary human. Viscount Cossack. King, what business do you have with me this time? I didn't do anything guilty. Suddenly Viscount Cossack shouted out in distress. However, he was interrupted and Baron Barullado explained. While explaining, his face turned from blue to pale white. Viscount Cossack. Impossible. Is that a monster? Even if you're dealing with a lesser monster, I'm a noble. Headache. I have thus been offended. Not hurting this guy seems like it's going to cause an even greater headache, though. However, I endured for the sake of the words I had spoken earlier. If it wasn't for the promise, things would have gotten dangerous. Though the king had surprisingly let loose a surge of rage, if a person was weak, they might have even ended up dead. Probably concerned about my temper in this situation. King Burut, you may silence yourself. By this highness decree in regards to this issue, we shall formally decide upon the full dissolution of the Cossack household. Regarding the former Viscount Cossack's deportation, will accept any formal objection. There's more than enough evidence here, so it would be useless to complain. To continue, the former Viscount will be detained for the entire duration of his trial. Your accommodation shall be that of a dungeon. Guards, remove them. This matter is closed. Just as he said that, both characters had been taken back out just as fast as they had come, bringing along with him naught but little things. His personality sucked, but he will be properly punished for his crimes. I have no objections. Now only the man in black remained, the one most presumably from Cerberus. The problem is with the nonchalant look in the Cerberus executive's face. It seems like he was also dragged along before he was able to explain his circumstances. Putting aside the organization, does he have any idea where he is at the moment? No. Was he notified by the country to receive a request? I decided to take a second look at that figure. High-quality clothes, elegant manners, a very insidious look. His mouth curved into a smile as if he was enjoying the situation. Slowly, Mysterious man, full moon, it appears someone had accidentally stepped on a landmine. That atmosphere around you, it surpasses the demon lord who came to make a contract. You're a big shot. Apparently something unexpected and unfavorable has happened, and I do apologize for that. I have a certain manner of business with this one, if you would be so kind. Thus we approached with our business, dignified and sensible as well this one. I had taken on the form of a human, but I didn't release my demon lord's haki. If it's the Tengus, they would probably react all the same to this form. Yet, this person saw through my disguise at a glance. If it were me making negotiations with a demon lord, I would find it very difficult. A large organization, the counterpart of the Freedom Association, the secret organization. That's probably not all. Even the monarch of a country can't mess around with him. Then I fear the individual before me is Rimuru. I will say this first. I wish for you guys to release the captured elves, as well as the liberation of any other monsters you have caught. In addition, I would like to request that in the future, trapping, plundering, and capturing monsters within the Great Dura Forest to be prohibited. The Cerberus executive stared at me eye to eye at first, ignoring the stares of the king and the others. The king of Burmund stood as if he were a reserve attendant. Not even a voice of complaint was raised. One may as well get drunk in this atmosphere. This is proof that this person is no ordinary person. Well, what's your answer to my request? I almost continued with this after a short pause. Cerberus Big Three, Damurada. All right. Well, we'll return all the captured monsters, of course, the elves as well, and we, Cerberus, pledge henceforth never to interfere with the Great Jura Forest in the name of Damurada, one of the Big Three of Cerberus. He swore so impudently, as expected, huh? One of the Big Three. In other words, he's no executive at all. This guy is someone at the peak of the underworld. One of the 3 bosses who organizes the organization, Cerberus. He's such a person. Rimuru. All right. Since you pledged to not interfere with us in the future, I'll overlook it this time. However, do note that there will be no second time, okay? Even as one such as yourself, I would wonder what would happen if such a person found themselves at odds with one of the eight-star demon lords, backed by an entire nation of high-class demi-humans. This guy probably know from somewhere that I had gained rulership over Great Jura Forest as its demon lord. Thus, I tried testing this theory, my correspondence and my abilities. There's also evidence, since all the humans in the corner from Gourmand were rather surprised that a top executive came here. Even now, the high-ranking executives of Cerberus are all wrapped in a veil of mystery. This is what I gathered after the fact by some nobles that had come just to catch a glimpse of him. It seems when the elves were being raided, they were employed by the Viscount, thus making the situation easy to deal with. If anything went wrong, probably as they planned. Our meeting here is probably them using the chance my strength to determine my strength. This must be their plan. This was confirmed by Zoe's true thought transmissions, but there were no signs of an assault. I'll bet. The moment he lured me out, the plan was a success. I ordered Zoe to withdraw from the location. Cerberus Big Tree Dalmorada. No, I suppose it is as expected. I've been seen through. The rising star of the eight stars, I can't be careless around you. The one I was previously acquaintances with, Clayman Sama, can't even be compared to you. Meeting you is my honor. Hi, Demon Lord Rimuru. I hope we can form friendly relations in the future. As expected, he caught on. What a landmine I stepped on, and I feigned ignorance. Even though I knew he had the skills, I wasn't afraid. Quite the careful individual, the Morada of Cerberus. It appears he's going to be a tricky adversary. And the special armor we provided the Orc Lords with, he might be aware of it as well. I wondered, was this orchestrated by Yuki? But as expected, I was traced. Even so, it's not unexpected for other organizations to be involved. No, their relation is currently unknown. Damorada bowed gracefully towards us and left the place. They had a sense of obligation now and the promise to send over the monsters they had captured as slaves. After just a week, as promised, the captured monsters were delivered to the country of Monsters Tempest. Okay, translator's notes. Mm, End of chapter 103.